Okay, I'm going to make a somewhat optimistic Kyrie Irving video. We hear now more and more he's saying all this stuff about being okay or even wanting to be in Boston. And it's always a little bit qualified, but here's the least qualified thing he's ever said about that. And he says, even if I had the inclination to test free agency, Boston would be like, no, you are coming back. And I'm fine with that. And so, yeah, I think he's just warming up more and more. He also wants to silence. He doesn't want to be asked every day about if he's happy in Boston or, what he thinks about Kevin Knox's outstanding rookie season or things like that. He wants to put that to rest because that's just tiring no matter what his ultimate plans are. And, this is exactly the kind of thing you would want to say. Like, who's gonna be asking him about the Knicks and free agency after he says something like this, right? He absolutely nips it in the bud preemptively. So it's smart by Kyrie, and I think he would. I think he's more and more, as Jimmy Butler is exploring all his non-New York options like Miami, Toronto, LA Clippers. Kyrie doesn't want to play in LA being in the shadow of LeBron James. He's always said he's a New York guy. I don't even think he necessarily wants to go to Miami, although he might. But anyway, he knows he's in a good situation. Even if he wanted to hate the Celtics, like he basically seems to have wanted to hate them last year, he ultimately can't. They're too likable, right? And their egos are too healthy and limited for Kyrie Irving to really butt heads in a huge way with some other egomaniac on the team. So that's what he would get if he went to the New York Knicks, because Kevin Knox has a healthy, limited ego, and so does Kristaps Porzingis to a certain extent. And so he could get the same thing in New York or Boston, but Boston is the much better team, and Boston can also offer him that fifth year at $43 million when he's 32 years old. And he knows his health is limited. He knows he may very well be a shell of himself within 5 years if these injuries keep up, if his knee continues to deteriorate. And so he's saying all the right things, and I think there is some sincerity. If Boston offers the fifth year, supermax, ridiculous, whatever contract it is, almost $200 million, then Kyrie would probably want that as of right now. And you obviously can't blame him for that. Jeff Goodman also made a really interesting comment saying that the reason he has always expected Kyrie Irving to stay in Boston long term isn't necessarily because this is his dream situation, but because he's so image conscious. The same image consciousness that would drive him to New York would also keep him in Boston, because he would look really, really bad if he leaves a championship Cleveland Cavaliers team and then leaves a championship level Boston Celtics team just 2 years later to go to a team that is not championship level. So if he leaves, it's going to be for a championship contention level team. And if he doesn't go to a championship contention team, nobody's going to forgive him, and his brand is going to take a huge toll, even if he's going to New York, where he could otherwise build his brand. So he's kind of stuck in some ways, traded to a team that's basically too good and too likable and too set up for the long term for Kyrie to leave. And maybe Danny Ainge in his wisdom and Vic Grauspick were thinking somewhat along those lines the whole time. It was certainly worth rolling the dice on Kyrie Irving and hoping that he could maybe mature. And I think he has matured somewhat. I think even though it was ridiculously immature to abandon the Celtics last summer, when they looked like they were cruising to the NBA Finals, for Kyrie Irving's low level of maturity, I think there has been some maturation. And he still referred to himself as a kid. He said he's technically a kid at 26 years old yesterday at Media Day. So he's still got major maturity concerns, but he's done some growing up from last year. And that's what injuries can do. They make you realize your mortality, and watching a team absolutely thrive and dominate without you, for a guy like Kyrie Irving, that's got to be somewhat of a healthy reality check. perhaps an unhealthy reality check at first. He was so disgusted and stressed out that he left the team, but no doubt led to some maturation, some personal growth, being humble just a little bit. And we will see how long he stays humble, but I have a strong feeling that Kyrie Irving is going to start out this season. Remember, I don't know exactly how Kyrie Irving intended to start last season, but with Gordon Hayward going down in the first 2 minutes from a terrible, ill-advised lob pass from shooting guard turned point guard Kyrie Irving, that was such a basically devastating event for the Celtics that it really rallied them together, and Kyrie Irving was rallied along that teamwork framework as well in those hard times. And it wasn't until a couple months later, after a 16-game winning streak, and after Kyrie Irving was voted, or about to be voted, NBA All-Star starter, that Kyrie Irving really let his selfish tendencies take over. And, while his knee was giving him troubles and he was dealing with those insecurities, which led him to double down on his selfishness and his ego and that immaturity. But this year, I believe it's going to be a little bit different. I think he's going to start out the season on the right note, just like he basically did last year after the devastating Gordon Hayward injury. And while I don't think he was going to carry himself as such last year, if Gordon Hayward had not been injured, I think this year there's been enough personal growth that he's going to consistently bring a maturity and team-first attitude for at least the first probably 3 months of the season, with the possible exceptions coming in the fourth quarter of games and coming against top teams where he tries to just play hero and go one-on-one with Steph Curry and some of these other guys. But other than that, I think he is going to be a team player for a little while. And we will see how restless and how much he slips back into his old habits and how much he's threatened by the emergence of guys like Tatum and Brown and Rozier as well, and Gordon Hayward. But with Brad Stevens talking about how much he's going to be playing Kyrie Irving off the ball this year, I made a video about that on Patreon. Kyrie Irving is going to be in a position to basically get his stats without dominating the ball and without holding the team hostage or hijacking the offense. And I do think that as long as Kyrie Irving is getting his, averaging at least, say, 23 points a game, he will ultimately be willing in the short term. And remember, in Kyrie Irving years, it's like less than dog years. In dog years, a year is like, 2 or 3 years, right? In Kyrie Irving years, 1 year is like 4 or 5 years, okay? It's an eternity for a guy with limited patience who's always looking for a new challenge, who doesn't really develop deep bonds with pretty much anybody around him. So let's just enjoy this year and let's treat it like 5 years. And to Kyrie, let's treat it like 5 years and enjoy the whole thing. Enjoy this like the whole KG era or something like that, in just 1 or 2 years. So we will see if towards the end of the year, if he starts getting more and more selfish, or he starts resenting more and more that he's being played off the ball. But ultimately, because he will have played like a good team player for the first month, 2, 3, maybe even 4 months of the season, he's going to see how successful and dominant the Celtics are with him playing in that role, and knowing that he's still able to get his stats. That's going to go a long way. So if Kyrie Irving is playing 50% of his minutes as basically a shooting guard off the ball, he's still going to get his points. It's going to be much more okay for the team if Kyrie Irving, when he does get the ball, if he's looking to score just about every single time. It's much better than him bringing the ball up the court and having the same attitude and nobody else getting to touch the ball, okay? If someone else is bringing the ball up the court, they're passing it to this guy, they're passing it to that guy, then they're passing it to Kyrie, and then he's going into his isolation thing. And that just keeps everybody else a little more happy because someone else got to bring the ball up the court, somebody else got to touch the ball, somebody else got to pass it to that guy, and then that guy got to pass it to Kyrie Irving. So most everybody has touched the ball most times down the court, and Kyrie Irving is still able to get his points and his simple statistics, which is what he's most concerned with. Now, one concern is going to be if his knee does act up or any other injury. I'll make another video about that, though, and that's on the negative side, so I will keep this positive. So Kyrie Irving is not going to be able to argue with the success of the Celtics with Kyrie Irving playing perhaps 40 to 50% of his minutes off ball, and even his total minutes being significantly limited. Another way to help make sure that Kyrie Irving gets his stats, guys, which would keep him relatively happy in itself, is to let him play in those fourth quarters when the Celtics have a 15, 20-point lead. Now, Kyrie Irving can quickly blow a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter, but if it's 15 or 20 points and it's against a bad team, that's going to be harder to do, and Kyrie Irving is going to probably embrace those blowout situations where he can just shoot every single time and get his points. When the other team's not even trying, Kyrie Irving doesn't really care. He's still going to get his points, and when the game recap comes out and the coverage comes on the Sports Center, they're going to say Kyrie Irving leads the team with 25 or 27 or 30 points, even if that's not the real story of the game. And if 10 or 15 of those points came in a blowout fourth quarter, So that's one way to keep Kyrie involved. I'm actually more concerned about keeping Terry Rozier healthier for the playoffs than I am about Kyrie Irving. Because I think this team is just so finely tuned. And what they really need is a 3-and-D point guard who can rebound like a monster in those playoffs. And anyway, guys, this is the optimistic Kyrie video. And I know it's not that optimistic by a lot of standards, but I think even if Kyrie wants to go selfish later in the year, it's going to be so hard for him to do because the Celtics will have played so well. Kyrie Irving is not going to get in the way of early season domination, in my opinion, more or less. And Brad Stevens knows exactly how to handle him, it would appear. Not exactly, but by gushing over Kyrie's supposed intelligence, what Brad Stevens is actually doing is surely you're smart enough to realize that it's good for you and the team for you to play off ball a lot more than you did last year. And so Kyrie Irving, when he's thinking about rebelling against that, he's got to say, wait a minute, if I rebel against that, I'm going to look like a dumbass. So that's all good, and that's a smart move by Brad Stevens. We will see if Brad Stevens is able to pull out Kyrie when we've got a 7-point lead in the fourth quarter, and Kyrie Irving is trying to take over games and making unwise decisions and while being a deficit on defense and potentially dragging down the energy of the players around him. We will also see if the really big games of the year, like playing against Houston or playing against the Warriors or the Lakers as well, is this guy going to want to go one-on-one with LeBron basically, and the Toronto Raptors as well when it's him and Kawhi Leonard and Kyle Lowry. Is this guy really just going to try to take the offense hostage? But if Brad Stevens is aggressive and limits Kyrie's ability and opportunities to hold the offense hostage, then ultimately we're going to be okay. And and when Terry Rozier and Marcus Smart come in the game, there's going to be that instant energy change every single time. All of a sudden, the Celtics bench is just going to force its will on people, and having more starters in there like Gordon Hayward and an improved Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown in there, that bench with some assistance from the starters is going to be much more of a force than it was last year. So anyway, I'm feeling really good about this season, basically. We're not going to see bad Kyrie until 3 or 4 months down the road for the most part. And if we do lose a couple early games against big teams and Kyrie Irving was shooting too much, perhaps especially in the fourth quarter, trying to be the hero, not using smart ball control and passing up the hot hand when guys like Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown or Gordon Hayward are on fire, but it's the fourth quarter and Kyrie wants it to be Kyrie time. Even if that does cost us a couple games early in the season, it's ultimately not going to kill us. So people think there might be an adjustment period, but early in the year and with 9 of our first 13 games on the road, but I really don't see that happening. Our biggest weakness is Kyrie Irving going selfish in the fourth quarter. But most of these games are going to be blowouts enough, even on the road, that we're not going to be put in those situations. And if we are, as the season goes along and we have more and more success, Brad Stevens should be more and more aggressive, hopefully, at keeping Kyrie Irving out of those clutch minutes where he is extremely overrated. And just because of this, so Kyrie's going to get his, but it's mostly going to come in blowout wins and the ever so rare blowout loss, but mostly blowout wins. Because let's face it, the NBA is very unbalanced right now. The Celtics are right close to the top of a very unbalanced league, so there's going to be plenty of opportunity for Kyrie Irving to pad his stats in these blowout wins where nothing's on the line and the other team has already quit in the second quarter or even the first quarter because the Celtics are so far in their heads and the bench unit is able to just dominate. So feeling really good about the season. There's less and less that Kyrie Irving is able to do to hijack the team, and with his maturity growth, to whatever extent it is, it's something. And he's not going to go rogue, in my opinion, until at least probably February, March. And anyway, we're going to have such a huge start by then that it won't really matter. And Brad Stevens will be in a stronger position as coach to limit Kyrie Irving's ability to go rogue and destroy this team. Now, hopefully we go through some hardships during the season and we're able to recognize weaknesses and such things like that. And so that Kyrie Irving, when it comes to the playoffs, he's not just shooting us out of the second round or something like that by going hero ball. But another optimistic thing about Kyrie is even if he misses the playoffs with injury, just the fact that he's healthy now and the fact that he should likely go through a large chunk of the season healthy, he's just able to fill minutes. Okay, so it keeps some of the wear and tear off the bodies of guys like Terry Rozier, Marcus Smart, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. It helps keep everybody healthy. Just getting through the regular season is a big part of the battle when the playoffs come because the freshest, healthiest team often has a big advantage in the playoffs. And just getting significant minutes out of Kyrie is going to just help everybody else stay fresher. So there's that as well. And likewise, Kyrie Irving having so much depth and competition and talent on the roster is going to help him stay healthier as well. We will see if later in the year, if he gets restless and he starts feeling threatened or impinged upon by having his minutes limited and by having his points per game only average around 23 points a game, while his advanced stats are showing him as the fourth or fifth best player on the Celtics because of his defense and rebounding shortcomings. But, even some of his advanced stats should benefit from playing late in these games and these blowout losses where Brad Stevens just lets Kyrie Irving run wild in Kyrie Irving mode when there's a little bit less on the line, a little bit less to go wrong. Anyway, that's about as optimistic as I can be about Kyrie Irving, but it's pretty optimistic, I'd say. Let me know what you guys think. I'll see you soon. Peace.